Hello ctrlX fans, Sam Gilk here with Bosch Rexroth. Today I'm going to be highlighting a new application called the IoT Dashboard, which is based on the popular data visualization tool Grafana. So this is an awesome application that allows you to create very quick and easy, but yet very visually appealing and useful visualizations for your application or process data. So I have a fresh installation of the app here. I open it up using the sidebar menu on the ctrlX Core web interface labeled IoT Dashboard, and this is the home page that you get when you open it for the first time. So there's a few main elements that are used in constructing dashboards and organizing them in a project. So Grafana supports the use of what are called folders, where you can store a number of dashboards. And then inside of a dashboard, you'll have rows which organize a number of panels. So we'll dive into each of these individually. So to start, on the left-hand menu here, I have this dashboard submenu. If I open it up, it will show all of my available folders as well as the dashboards associated with them. So by default, I have this general folder here with no dashboards in it. For this demo, I'll create a new folder first. Call this demo folder. And then immediately I'm prompted with the option to create a dashboard inside of this folder. So I will do that. And my dashboard is created. Before we go into panels and rows and actually configuring the layout of an individual dashboard, I'll save this one to give it a name. And now when I go back to my dashboards menu, you can see I have a demo folder and demo dashboard 1. So you can store multiple dashboards within a folder. I'll create a new one here just to show you. And I'll place it in the demo folder. Now I come back to my dashboards menu and you can see both of those dashboards are within the demo folder. So next we'll move on to configuring a dashboard layout. So when I select my demo dashboard 1, this button here allows you to add a panel as well as rows, but first we'll just start by creating a couple of panels. So I create a panel here, and the IoT dashboard automatically places the data displayed as just a random walk data set, just to kind of allow you to visualize what your panel might look like with some real data. So you can give a title to your panel here. I'll call this panel 1 and apply. And now we have our first panel here. Now there's a couple easy ways to actually position and size your panels. So if you click on the top little taskbar here, you can drag and place your panel where you'd like. You can also resize using the bottom right-hand corner here. So fairly simple. Now the next thing you can do is actually just duplicate a panel, and it'll create a copy of your previous panel configuration. To edit a panel, you click on the top bar here and you can select edit. So now I'll give this one a name, panel 2. So we can move these around wherever we'd like them, resize them. It's really easy. Next, what we can do is add a row. So rows are used to just organize your panels a little better in case you don't want to show all of them. So I can create a new row. We might have 2. And here I will give this one row 1 as a name. This one we'll call row 2. So then I can place panels within an individual row. So if I put my panel 1 up here, panel 2 down here, then I can collapse them if I don't want to view them at any time. So that's it for basic dashboard configuration. Next, we're going to move on to configuring data sources so we can put some real real useful data here on our charts. All right, so now that we have a couple of visualizations set up here, let's grab some real data to plot here. So I'm going to cover a couple of data sources today, InfluxDB and MySQL. When it comes to InfluxDB, I'm not going to cover in this video how to actually load data into InfluxDB from your ctrlX core or other sources, but rather only how to extract it out of InfluxDB and use it in your visualizations in your IoT dashboard. I will link to a video in the description that covers how to actually pull data into InfluxDB. So to access my InfluxDB running on my core, I come to my ctrlX core web interface and click the InfluxDB side menu here. This opens up my InfluxDB. I already have data in a couple of buckets here. So I have demo bucket and I have a few different data sets. So all I'm going to need from my InfluxDB at this point is an API token. So I come to this up arrow side menu here, select API tokens and generate API token. I'll give this token all access and we'll name it demo token. I'll copy this value to my clipboard and then we're going to use it to configure the data source on the IoT dashboard side. So now I'll come back to my IoT dashboard and using the configuration menu on the left-hand side, I'll select data sources. In this menu, I'm given the option to add a data source. There's tons of data sources here that are available by default in the IoT dashboard. But for today, we're just going to cover InfluxDB and then MySQL. So I'll start with InfluxDB. I'll give it a name here, local InfluxDB, because it's running locally on the core. And then I'll select the query language as Flux. The URL is going to be exactly what the default is here. So it's http://localhost port 8086. And then my credentials, my basic auth details are what are used in my InfluxDB. So I have this user set up in InfluxDB, Bosch Rexroth. Then finally, I need to give the InfluxDB details. So my organization is Bosch Rexroth. My token, I just pasted from the value I copied from the API token I generated here. And then the default bucket is going to be demo bucket. All right. Save and test. The data source is working. It found the 3 buckets. So if I go back, you can now see I have this local InfluxDB as a data source. Next, I'll cover the MySQL as a data source. Okay, let's go right ahead and configure a data source for a MySQL database. So again, I'm going to click the Add Data Source button over here. And this time I'm going to search for MySQL. I'll select this. And in this case, the database is not running locally on my ctrlX core. It's running on my PC. So I'm going to give it a name PC, MySQL. And for that reason, I can't just use localhost, but I have to give the IP address of my PC on the same port 3306. So, all right. And my database name is test. The user I've set up in MySQL is Bosch Rexroth, and I've given it a password. And the rest we should be able to leave as the default. All right. Save and test. My database connection is okay. All right. Now we can browse the data that is on the MySQL database. So I'm going to choose from the dataset test and test table. I'm going to select all of the data there. And this will automatically generate a MySQL query that you can execute, and all of the data is pulled in here. Okay, so now we have the 2 data sources configured here, our local InfluxDB and the PC MySQL database. So let's go ahead and utilize some of this data in our dashboards. In order to replace the random walk data that we're seeing generated by Grafana on our first panel here, we're going to left click on the panel, select Edit, and then under Data Source, we'll now see our two configured data sources available. So we have our local InfluxDB and our PC MySQL. So if we want to pull data from our local InfluxDB, I'll select this data source, and then we're given an option to enter a query here. So rather than constructing our query from scratch, I'm going to show you how you can generate this query in InfluxDB directly. So I'm going to move back to my InfluxDB application, and on the left-hand menu under Data Explorer, I'm going to select which fields I'm interested in. So I have my demo bucket, I have a couple of metrics here, and I'm going to select CPU usage percentage. If I submit this query, you'll see the data is pulled in here. Now to view the actual query that was used to retrieve this data, I'll click Script Editor. Now here, the query is displayed, so I can just copy and paste this directly into my IoT Dashboard application. And now when I execute this query, the data is pulled in here. All right, so now we have a real data set from our InfluxDB on this panel. So next, I'm going to go through some of the configuration options on the time series plot here. So some of the ones I've found most useful, and they're all fairly intuitive in my opinion, self-descriptive on the menu here. This values field, you can display, for example, the mean average value in your legend. You can also place a label on the y-axis. So I'll call this usage. You can change the scale. You can change the line style, so you can make them bars, points. I'll stick with lines here. You can change the line interpolation. So we do linear, smooth, step. We'll stick with linear here. Change the line width, fill opacity. And then what I like to do is actually use this gradient mode as a coloring here. So what this does is it corresponds to your color scheme. So this is the classic palette, but if I switch here to green, yellow, red, you'll see the higher values are influenced to a more reddish hue, and the green are lower values. So a really cool thing you can do with this is actually select from thresholds. And now we can configure thresholds at which the color of the line plot will change. And you can also use these to trigger alerts and things like that. So let's go ahead and set the red threshold for example, 20. So now you can see this section here is red. We can add another one at, for example, 10. So all the values above 10 are now yellow. You can also zoom in on this area of the plot to see it a little better. This really helps you to visualize when your parameters are within certain ranges. So lastly here, display name can be used instead of the default value pulled out of your InfluxDB. You can set something here like ctrlX core CPU usage to make it a little more readable. All right, so there is a nice chart for our first panel, and this is a time series plot. So if I click apply, this is now on our dashboard. So finally, I'm going to show how easy it is to build the rest of the dashboard after your first chart is configured. So now that we have this panel here, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. So the same chart is now shown below, but instead of this data, I want to plot a different data set. So I'm going to go back to InfluxDB. I'm going to go to my query builder and select a different metric. I'll then go to my script editor, copy and paste. I'll edit this panel, and then I'll paste in the new query. So now we have this entirely new data set out of InfluxDB. So let's say I want to then switch the style of chart. So rather than a time series, I can make it a bar chart. You can do this for tons of other different types of visualizations. So let's stick with the bar chart here. Call this then panel 3. And I want my labels here to be rotated. Let's space them out a little less. That looks pretty good there. And see, we've retained our same configuration from the previous chart. So this is already called ctrlX core CPU usage. This is now memory usage. So let's change that. And let's add a unit to our y-axis, for example, %. And we can give it a label. We can then configure new thresholds here. So let's say above 40% is going to be red. And 30% will be yellow. The rest will be green. And then to apply that to our chart, we'll scroll up here and we will select gradient mode scheme. So now you can see we've got a few yellow values, the rest are all red. Okay, and if we apply, here's the chart zoomed out then to the larger time frame. So if we say, also this is something I may have glossed over, but from here you can select which time range you'd like to view your charts over. So if we select the last 1 hour, zooms in a little bit, last 6 hours, 12 hours, etc. Okay, so then again, we can duplicate this. And another useful panel is just what's called table. So this is just your raw data coming in with timestamps. Apply that. Resize these a little bit. And now we've got a few new panels on our dashboard. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show is that there is an alerting. I'll save my dashboard. There's an alerting feature very similar to that of InfluxDB that's covered in another video that I'll link in the description, so I'm not going to go over that here. But essentially, you can set alerts to come over email, Slack, Discord if one of your thresholds has been exceeded or some other rule. But the last thing I'd like to show is under Preferences in your configuration setting, you can choose what your default dashboard is. So let's select our demo dashboard 1, save. And now when I go to the home page, I'll see that dashboard. So if I close out here and I come back to my ctrlX core and open up my IoT dashboard again, I'll then see this dashboard. You can also enter into a kiosk mode where you don't have the configuration menus using this button called cycle view mode. As a little bonus, I'm going to go over how you might embed your newly created IoT dashboard in an HTML5 based HMI solution using an iframe. So in order to do that, we're going to need to modify a couple of settings in the Grafana.ini file. You can find that in the ctrlX core web interface under Manage App Data and IoT Dashboard configuration file. Here you'll see the Grafana.ini file, which holds all of the startup settings for Grafana. So the two we're going to need to modify are allow embedding. We're going to want to set that equal to true. That allows browsers to render Grafana in an iframe. And also, I'm going to set anonymous access to be enabled so that we aren't prompted with a login screen when we load our our dashboard in the iframe. So now that we have those set to true, a power cycle is required to get these to take effect in the IoT dashboard. I'm going to come over to WebIQ, which I'm going to use as my HMI. I have a little demo application here called iframe demo. And in my application, I have an iframe widget here, which takes a source URL. And all I've done is set that to the URL of my ctrlX core and /Grafana, which is the home page of the IoT dashboard. So as you can see here, my IoT dashboard is displayed in an iframe within my HMI. All right, that is it for the IoT dashboard overview. I hope you all enjoyed it and it was useful.